Chapter 1. You are listening at FameTV.info. Well. In a dark room. With a glimmer of light, you can see a young man curled up on the bed. Now he is frowning, his eyes are closed tightly, and moaning pain from time to time for a long time. The young man suddenly opened his eyes and sat up in panic. Trembling and groping to turn on the bedside lamp, his face was full of uncertainty, looking at the surrounding scene. Nightmare. No, definitely not a nightmare. That's true. It's not a dream. The young man wiped off the fine cold sweat on his forehead, felt the wet feeling of his hands, and murmured to himself. Where is this? Why do you think my brain is so confused? It's like there's another person's memory. What happened to me? The young man rubbed his hair painfully and growled in a low voice. The memory that originally belongs to me is completely stored in my mind. Net text writer, wrote most of his life basketball text, with the speed of a few months, wrote nearly 100 basketball novels in his life. This is my own memory, no, these hands. The young man looked at his hands in horror. These hands are so young, not like the hands of a dying old man. And another memory. Frowning, the young man forced himself to calm down, endured the sharp pain in his mind, and began to try to recall another memory. Lee Chekta. Assistant professor of basketball team of Purdue University. No, it's the head coach. The Devil Bishop system is bound. That does not belong to their own memory was slowly torn apart, but also caused young people headache, do not dare to continue to think. With sweat rolling down his forehead, the young man finally realized an obvious fact. That's in crossing. It seems that I'm still carrying the system through with the help of the information just now. The young people slowly organized their thoughts. Like my old name, Richard. I also eat basketball. I am a basketball writer, but he sounds like a basketball coach of Pheasant University. By the way, what time is it? Richard got up in a hurry and wanted to find something that could read the date, such as a mobile phone or a newspaper. At the moment when he got up, Richard saw a mirror in the room and looked at it curiously. The faces in the mirror are familiar to Richard, but they are the faces of his youth without any change. He has a strong nose and a sharp face. Many people say that Richard in his youth looks like Louis. 25. 30. Richard looked at the face in the mirror and tried to deduce his age. However, there was no difference between a 25-year-old man and a 30-year-old man in appearance. Richard thought for a moment, then he continued to look for mobile phones or newspapers with a wry smile and shaking his head. I've encountered such supernatural phenomena as taking and giving up. I've even thought about how old I am. It's really a big idea. To Richard's disappointment, he didn't even touch his mobile phone in his clothes and trousers. He also searched the table in the room, but still didn't see it. Damn it. How down to earth this man is. He doesn't even have a cell phone. Richard could not help but scold himself. As he looked across the corner of the table, Richard suddenly found something familiar to him. Is this a cell phone? Richard couldn't help but take the cell phone at the corner of the table to his hand. The big brother, who weighs half a kilo, suddenly gave Richard a sense of foreboding. After a press on the cell phone, there was no dim light emitted by the cell phone in Richard's memory. With the help of the light, Richard found that the cell phone didn't even have a screen. Damn it. It's over. What era have I crossed? Last century. Seeing that the cell phone can be used normally, Richard was directly despairing. At least in his memory, the cell phone was one of the things in the Hong Kong police and bandit movies of the 1980s and 1990s. This makes him more eager to know his current year. It's impossible to check the date. There's no screen on it. Richard doesn't believe in evil. He continues to search the room. Finally, he found half of the newspapers on the water tank of the toilet. As for where the other half went, Richard couldn't think if it's as he thought it would be. It's such a miserable day that he takes the newspaper and opens his ass. Strong from suppress the hesitation in the heart, Richard looked at the date on the newspaper. June 7, 1994, English. Not only is the date in English, but Richard finds that the whole newspaper is all in English. He knows the big picture. Probably because of another Richard's memory, he can read English fluently, and naturally knows it's June 1994. Are you kidding me? 1994, Richard is a fool. Not only time, but also from the name of this newspaper, he knows that he is not in China at this moment. Indiana Herald Guard. Am I in Laomei's territory now? Richard thought doubtfully, trying to tear up the memory that didn't belong to him, but there was a sharp pain in his mind, which made him dare not act rashly. Time, place and body are all not right, Richard can now be extremely sure, his own this is no doubt through. Sitting on the edge of the bed, Richard still couldn't figure out why this kind of illusory thing happened to him. I am just an ordinary person, or I am in my previous life. It's too common to be ordinary. Although his previous career was special, he relied on code words to eat and wrote basketball novels full time, but his income was not special at all. Because of the small audience and limited level, his previous life's income was only enough to support his family. Compared with those working class, there was no special place. The only special experience in his life is that when Richard was 50 years old, he had written basketball novels for decades and was familiar with basketball. With the introduction of his book Friends, he took a part-time job as a coach of basketball team in a local third-class university. This should be the most worthy experience of Richard's previous life. But what does it have to do with crossing? He has no idea. What should I do next? The time point is totally different from his previous life. It is impossible to go back to China and continue to live in his previous life. For a while, Richard was confused. Come on, let's settle down. I've been mediocre in my previous life. Maybe I can live better this time. Now Richard is the head coach of the basketball team of Purdue University. It sounds like a private pheasant university in China. But with more and more memories in his mind, Richard finds that he is really lucky. Purdue University school team, the top team in NCAA Level 1 league, it is not too much to say that this school is a famous basketball school. NCAA head coach. Interesting. I'm afraid that's the beginning of the legendary gold game in his previous life. Richard has written basketball articles for a lifetime. Naturally, Richard knows how difficult it is to become the head coach of an NCAA team. Now he has directly obtained the identity of the head coach, and he is still the head coach with a system. It's not too much to say that it's a golden start. Well, 94, my God, it's not just the beginning of gold, it's like the beginning of diamonds. From the 90s to the first decades of the 21st century, I have written for a lifetime. I can't be familiar with it anymore. Is this the chance that God gave me? Let me not be mediocre in my life. Richard soon realized how advantageous it was for a basketball writer to live in this era. With the memory of his past life, once he can control an NBA team, it's a piece of cake for him to turn waste into treasure, pick up the draft and so on. Richard is also familiar with the NBA tactics that are popular in the future, and some earth-shaking events happened in the league. He was also able to predict ahead of time to prepare. Of course, the premise is that Richard can get into the position of NBA head coach. In this life, I want to live like a man. Richard quickly walked out of the panic, clenched his fist and said to himself. Listen to the full novel at FameTV.info, direct link in the description.